Welcome to the debate. Yesterday, we watched a team score 204 runs in just a few hours, which is, a massive, heroic total by any historical standard.
Oh, absolutely. It was a staggering chase.
Right, but they still lost. The Rampage Rhinos suffered a narrow 12-run defeat to the Rising Stars, who posted a towering 216 runs. And honestly, watching that absolute roller coaster forces us to ask a really difficult foundational question about limited overs cricket.
It really does, because for anyone learning the sport, this match was a perfect case study.
Exactly. It makes you wonder, has the era of patiently building an innings officially died? We are looking at a fundamental crossroads in how the sport is played. Does modern cricket demand relentless, explosive aggression at the crease from the very first delivery? Or do traditional tactical pacing, defensive solidity, and calculated gap finding still form the blueprint for consistent success?
It's the ultimate clash of coaching philosophies.
It is. And I take the position that unapologetic, modern power hitting is the ultimate win condition. It is a complete paradigm shift that dismantles opponents and frankly renders traditional defensive tactics obsolete.
And I take the contrasting perspective. While explosive hitting makes for spectacular highlights, it is a high-variance strategy. I'd argue that tactical decision-making, pacing in innings, and the ability to absorb and redirect pressure remain the true differentiators in a tight match.
The fundamentals of resource management have not changed just because bats have gotten bigger.
Well, to understand why modern power hitting is the ultimate weapon, we really only need to look at the tape of this match. Watching this game unfold live proved one undeniable thing. Overwhelming aggression dictates the terms of engagement. It entirely removes the opponent's ability to plan.
It certainly disrupts them, I'll give you that.
Right. And the focal point of this, the absolute embodiment of the modern game, was the explosive performance of the Rising Stars' Ankur Pandey. I mean, he smashed 88 runs off just 36 deliveries. It was a breathtaking display of hand-eye coordination, truly.
But it was more than just coordination. It was a structural dismantling of the bowling attack. Pandey was operating at a strike rate of 244.44. And just for the beginner cricket learners or student athletes tuning in, your strike rate is simply how many runs you score per 100 balls faced. So Pandey is projecting nearly 250 runs per 100 balls.
Which is just an astronomical number.
Exactly. And you do not achieve that kind of velocity by gently knocking the ball around the turf. You achieve it by clearing the boundary rope on the full, hitting what we call a 6, right? Which he did 5 times, plus 12 boundaries driven into the turf for 4 runs each. By swinging with that level of calculated violence, he completely neutralized the Rhinos' bowling tactics. Modern cricket requires this fearless approach. You want the opposition to look at the scoreboard and feel the game is already mathematically out of reach.
I hear that, but I come at it from a completely different way. Look, the fireworks from Ankur Pandey are undeniably brilliant, but relying solely on aerial boundary hitting is a fundamentally fragile strategy to build a team around.
How is it fragile if it wins you the game?
Because it's an anomaly. Yes, Pandey executed his role brilliantly in this specific instance, but the match itself was actually kept competitive by traditional tactical batting on the other side. Look at the Rhinos' Jeetu Rawat. He scored a magnificent 80 runs off 43 balls.
Yeah, but look at the difference in their impact. Root didn't win.
The impact is exactly what I want to highlight, though. Look at how Rawat accumulated those runs. He found the gaps in the inner fielding ring. He hit 13 boundaries along the ground, meaning he deliberately utilized the pace of the bowler, played with soft hands, and guided the leather past the fielders. He only hit a single 6.
Right. He played it safe.
He played it smart. If you are a young athlete analyzing this game to improve your own mechanics, you should study how the Rhinos managed to score 204 runs in response to a mammoth target. They paced their chase. They demonstrated that navigating pressure, manipulating the fielders to create scoring zones, and above all, valuing your wicket is just as critical as raw power. You make the bowler work exhaustively to get you out. Pandey's innings was an anomaly of execution. Ravi's innings is a repeatable, foundational skill.
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective on what actually happens to a fielding team when they face someone like Pandey. Let's dig into the psychology and, frankly, the sheer biomechanical impact of pure aggression.
Okay, let's hear it.
I vividly recall watching the 6th and 7th overs live. Rupesh Sharma, the bowler for the Rhinos, was running in, trying to execute his traditional plans, hitting a good length, aiming for the top of off stump, and Ankur Pandey just took him completely apart.
Yeah, it was a brutal sequence.
Brutal is an understatement. It was a sequence that read 4, 4, 6, 6, 6, 4. That is not just a batter scoring points. That is a tactical demolition of the opponent's morale. When Rupesh Sharma gets hit for that second consecutive 6, his cognitive load maxes out.
Sure, he feels the pressure.
He does more than feel it. He starts adjusting his release point a fraction of a second too early to compensate for Pandey stepping out of the crease, which completely flattens his trajectory. The bowler starts doubting his run-up, his wrist position, his field placements. He stops trying to get the batter out and just tries to survive the over. Aggression flips the script entirely. The batter becomes the dictator of the game, not the responder.
I acknowledge the spectacle of that over, and it certainly forces a bowler to recalibrate. But I really want to draw your attention to the inherent danger of adopting this mindset as a default. It ignores the reality of elite bowling.
What reality is that?
That when you step up against top-tier attacks, you will face bowlers who do not crumble when hit. Their mechanics hold up, and this brings us to the crucial concept of dot ball pressure.
Right, the pressure of not scoring?
Exactly. A dot ball, which, for our beginners, is a delivery where the batter cannot scrounge up a single run, is the bowler's most potent weapon. When a bowler strings together multiple dot balls, the psychological pressure on the batter to score rapidly escalates, and it almost always leads to a fatal mistake.
I mean, sometimes.
No. Look at the Rising Stars' own captain, Sanjeet Singh. He scored 20 runs off 21 balls, a struggle by any standard. During his time at the crease, he faced 3 consecutive dot balls from the Rhinos bowler P. Choudhary. Choudhary was hitting a hard length, giving Sanjeet no room to free his arms. And what happened?
He got out.
Yes, but how did he get out? Sanjeet panicked under the suffocating pressure of the rising required run rate. He tried to force an aggressive, modern shot across the line of the ball, missed it entirely, and was dismissed LBW.
Leg before wicket.
Yes.
For those learning the rules, that just means the ball crashed into his leg pads, and the umpire judged that, had his leg not been in the way, the ball would have shattered the stumps. That dismissal is a direct result of scoreboard panic. This moment right here proves that when pure aggression meets disciplined, restrictive bowling, the traditional defensive block is still an absolute necessity.
I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning. Because you are treating Sanjeet's dismissal as a failure of the aggressive mindset, rather than a failure to fully commit to it.
How so?
He got out precisely because he tried to hit a boundary he hadn't earned.
But if Sanjeet had employed Pandey's aggressive modern hitting technique successfully from the first delivery, instead of getting bogged down by traditional defensive blocks, wouldn't he have broken that dot ball pressure before it resulted in his wicket? The mistake wasn't trying to hit the ball. The mistake was letting P. Choudhary bowl 3 consecutive dot balls to begin with.
Come on.
No, seriously. In the modern game, if a bowler hits a good length, you don't just defend it. You step out of your crease, you change the angle, you manufacture a shot. By standing still inside his crease and allowing the dot ball pressure to build, Sanjeet played a traditional game that ultimately suffocated him.
That is a fundamental misunderstanding of how momentum works in a limited overs match. Cricket is an exercise in resource management. You only have 10 wickets to spend. You cannot manufacture a boundary off every single delivery, and attempting to do so bankrupts your batting order.
But it didn't bankrupt the Rising Stars. They scored 216.
Let's shift our focus to the tactical decision-making during the Rampage Rhinos run chase, because that illustrates my point perfectly. Chasing 216 is a monumental task.
It is. The scoreboard pressure is immense from the very first ball.
Exactly. And the reason the Rhinos got as close as 204 was precisely because players like Jeetu Rawat and Manoj, who scored a very measured 29 off 21 balls, built a foundation. They did not just swing wildly to match the required run rate, which was, hovering around 11 runs per over?
Yeah, it was creeping up there.
Right. So they assessed the field, they communicated, they hit the ball into the deep outfield and ran hard between the wickets to rotate the strike. You have to know when to absorb pressure and when to apply it. If Manoj and Jeetu had just swung at every ball trying to clear the ropes, they likely would have been bowled out for 120 by the 12th over. Pacing an innings ensures you actually have capable batters left to fight in the final overs.
But that pacing is exactly what cost them the game. I hear you talking about resource management and building a foundation, but look at the final scoreboard. The Rhinos ultimately fell 12 runs short. They lost. And the most glaring evidence that traditional pacing is an outdated concept came at the very end of their innings.
You are referring to P. Choudhary's late flurry?
I am referring to an absolute masterclass in late-stage hitting that proves my point entirely. P. Choudhary came in late for the Rhinos. He completely abandoned the traditional pacing model you are advocating for, and he played the modern way. He smashed an incredible 28 runs off just 10 balls. That is a strike rate of 280.
It was a great cameo, yes.
We watched a thrilling 19th over where he took apart the bowler Ahmed Paul, hitting him for 5 boundaries in a single over. 4, 4, 4, 4, a wide, and another 4. The sheer bat speed and audacity were breathtaking. My argument is simple. If the Rhinos had adopted this aggressive stance earlier in the innings, instead of politely pacing themselves, they would have easily chased down the 216 runs. They had the firepower, but their traditional mindset kept it locked away in the dugout until it was mathematically too late.
That's an interesting point, though. I would frame it very differently. You are looking at P. Choudhary's incredible cameo in complete isolation, stripped of its biomechanical and strategic context. P. Choudhary could only play that freely with a strike rate of 280 precisely because the top order absorbed the new ball pressure.
Oh, the new ball is just an excuse for conservative batting.
It is not an excuse. It is a physical reality of the sport. Look, the ball used in cricket is hard leather, wrapped around cork, held together by a pronounced raised seam. When that ball is brand new at the start of the innings, the lacquer is perfectly smooth and the seam is rigid. When fast bowlers hurl it down the pitch, it swings laterally through the air and bounces unpredictably off the pitch.
Sure, it swings a bit.
It swings a lot. It is incredibly difficult to hit cleanly because the trajectory is constantly changing. Jeetu and Manoj had to navigate that danger. They had to blunt the new ball. If you send your top order out to wildly attack a brand new swinging ball, you are not going to hit an early flurry of boundaries. You are risking edging the ball to the wicketkeeper and losing all your top batters for 50 runs. The foundation laid by the traditional batters is what physically degrades the ball, making it softer and more predictable. That is what gives the lower order hitters, like Choudhary, the license to swing. You cannot have the explosive finish without the calculated buildup.
I appreciate the mechanics of the new ball. And yes, the pronounced seam certainly aids the bowlers early on. However, the modern game has evolved beyond fearing it. The best teams attack the new ball precisely to put the fielding captain in immediate disarray, forcing them to push fielders back. But let's bring this debate to the bowling side, because pacing is entirely dictated by who is holding the ball. Let's talk about the role of the modern all-rounder versus the traditional specialist.
All right, the dynamic certainly shifts when we look at the fielding side.
The absolute MVP of this match, Ankur Pandey, did not just bat aggressively to score his 88 runs. He then took the ball. He bowled 3 overs, gave up only 11 runs, and took 2 crucial wickets. We are talking about an economy rate, the average number of runs a bowler gives up per over, of just 3.67.
In a game where both teams scored over 200 runs, that is statistically remarkable.
It is staggering. The modern game demands these dynamic players who can aggressively influence the match in multiple disciplines. He is the ultimate prototype for young student athletes to emulate. You don't just specialize in defense. You impose your will on the game, with the bat dominating the bowlers, and then he choked the life out of the opponent with the ball. He was a disruptive variable that the traditional Rhinos just could not solve.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that framing. In fact, I will use Ankur Pandey's bowling success to definitively prove my own point about traditional discipline. You call him a disruptive variable who imposed his aggressive will, but let's analyze how he actually achieved that remarkable economy rate of 3.67. Did he do it by bowling wild, aggressive, unpredictable deliveries? Did he try to bowl express pace and bounce the batters out?
Well, he didn't need to. He bowled to his field.
Exactly. He succeeded as a bowler precisely because he was incredibly economical, disciplined, and traditional. He stuck to a relentless line and length, pitching the ball consistently on the top of off stump, frustrating the batters and bowling those exact dot balls we discussed earlier. His bowling style was the starkest possible contrast to his batting style. When he had the ball in his hand, he was the picture of traditional, methodical defense.
But he was doing it to take wickets, which is inherently an aggressive act.
Taking wickets through pressure is the hallmark of traditional cricket. And furthermore, look at the Rhinos bowlers. Rahul Mishra took 2 wickets for 19 runs. Vipul Rana took 2 wickets for 22 runs. Both of them utilized disciplined traditional bowling techniques. They kept the seam upright. They set intelligent, restrictive fields, placing men out on the boundary to cut off the big shots and force the rising stars to take singles. They proved that disciplined, traditional line-and-length bowling is still the absolute best counter to aggressive batting. You don't stop a team by fighting fire with fire. You do it with cold, calculated precision.
It is fascinating how we can look at the exact same scorecard, watch the exact same biomechanics on the field, and walk away with such divergent lessons about the underlying mechanics of the sport.
It really is.
To summarize my position, while tactical pacing certainly has a historical place in the sport, this live spectacle demonstrated that the game has fundamentally changed at a structural level. Explosive, boundary-clearing aggression, epitomized by Ankur Pandey's 88 runs off 36 balls, and the Rising Stars' towering 216-run total, is the defining weapon in modern limited overs cricket. You do not win matches anymore by slowly accumulating runs, preserving wickets, and hoping the opponent makes a mistake in the final overs. You win by taking the game out of their hands entirely from the first delivery. The team that hits the most boundaries usually wins, and the Rising Stars proved that emphatically yesterday.
And to summarize my stance, I look at that exact same scoreboard and I see a 12-run margin of victory. That is incredibly narrow. It is literally 1 or 2 bad deliveries away from an entirely different outcome. That razor-thin margin proves that the Rampage Rhinos' calculated run chase and disciplined traditional bowling kept them in a game that, by your logic, should have been an absolute blowout. I want to emphasize to any student athletes listening that foundational defensive techniques, the ability to play out a maiden over without panicking, the skill of manipulating the field with soft hands, and the strategic match awareness to navigate the swinging new ball will always be necessary to anchor a team. Pandey's aggression won the battle, but Rawat's mechanics are what win the war.
I think what makes this sport so incredibly beautiful is how it accommodates both of these philosophies simultaneously. A 20-over match is a high-speed collision of ideas as much as it is a physical contest of bat and ball. If you are analyzing this match to understand the modern crossroads of the game, you have to look closely at both sides of the tape. Watch Ankur Pandey hitting those explosive boundaries that cleared the ropes, but you must also watch the quiet, tension-filled dot balls bowled by Vipul Rana and Rahul Mishra, who used geometry and patience to suffocate the batters.
Exactly. You have to study both sides of the coin to fully appreciate the profound tactical depth of the sport. It's a game of constant adaptation. The moment you commit entirely to relentless aggression, a disciplined bowler will find your edge. And the moment you commit entirely to passive defense, an aggressive batter will take the game away from you in the span of 2 overs.
So the next time you step onto the pitch, as the floodlights glare down and the bowler begins their run-up, you have to ask yourself a fundamental question about your own mechanics and mindset. Will you patiently build your foundation and wait for the right delivery, or will you step out of your crease, disrupt the bowler's rhythm, and try to break the game wide open? Thank you for joining us on The Debate.